So that is what I will be making in this video. A set of truly unique floating shelves. These shelves are currently in my daughter's room and she absolutely loves them. We all know how to cut sheets on a table saw, so I will skip that part completely and get directly to the assembly part. These shelves will host quite a lot of electronics in them. That also means that there will be a lot of wires in them. And that is what this groove is meant for, cable management. There will be a total of 4 shelves. 2 of them will have LED downlights, one for the bed and one for the desk. I use this adjustable drill to make the holes for the LED lamps, and to eliminate the blowout, I drill halfway through from one side, flip it over, and then I drill all the way through from the other side. Time to make the key feature of this build, the illuminated bookrest. I went online and tried to find some nice looking heart shapes, and then I modified it some and printed them out on a paper. Saying this out loud got me thinking. I should have 3D printed one heart and then copy it to the acrylic with a flush trim bit. That would have given me a far better result. Instead, I glued the papers to the acrylic and cut out the rough shapes with the bandsaw, and then I took one of the hearts and fine-tuned it to the exact shape I wanted. With that shape, I could now copy the exact same shape to the other hearts with a flush trim bit. I added a chamfer to all the shapes to intensify the light effect when the LEDs light them up from below. The bookrest need a slot to be inserted into, so I made the slots with the router. A router is nice and all that, but I still need to make the corners sharp, and I do that fairly quickly with a jigsaw. This slot over here is meant to hold a piece of acrylic, and below this acrylic I will add a LED strip, and that will create a really cool effect on the acrylic. I could just take my LED strip and place it over the hole like this and glue it in place. That would be a really easy and fast way to do it, but it would also be a permanent solution, meaning that I cannot change this out if it ever breaks. And I'm not too keen about that idea. So my solution to that was to design and 3D print this shape over here that will hold the LED strip that I can remove and replace whenever I want to. This goes over the hole like this, and inside this holder I can slide this piece. It's just a piece of plastic with a LED strip attached to it that just goes inside like that. And if it breaks, just pull it out, replace the LED strip, press it back in again. Alright, so let's get these LED strip holders assembled. These LED strips need to be replaceable, so a connector is a requirement. I crimp on some contact pins and press them into the connector. Then I solder the wires to the LED strip. Its parts are very tiny, so I better take it nice and steady. I insert the plastic strip into the holder, and then I attach the LED strip to the plastic strip. The holder acts as a guide, so the LED strip will be perfectly centered with basically no effort involved. This type of LED strip has a data in and a data out port, so I also have to solder on a wire on the data out port. Then I carefully glue the wire along the side of the LED strip with some super glue. And finally secure all the wires together with some heat shrinking tube. I tested again so they really fit into the holder. You never know, something might have happened along the way. With 4 shelves and 2 LED strips in each, I have a total of 8 holders. To attach the holders to the shelf, I first pre-drill with a self-centering drill bit, and then I screw it into place with some tiny screws. I have something to confess. I made a mistake. I used some too long screws, so they did poke out a tiny bit on the other side, but that wasn't too hard to fix. I just unscrew them, snip off the top and screw them back in. Alright, so let's turn all these sheets into a shelf, okay? With some glue and some quickly added brad nails, I fasten the front and the sides to the underside of the shelf shell. I placed some cut-off pieces from the wall bracket parts as spaces, and then I installed the top part. There are still some more holes to make for things to be installed. This hole is for a touch switch that has a built-in dimmer function. The switch will control the LED downlights. One of the shelves is going to be mounted above the bed, and that shelf is going to have a ton of features. One of them is a USB 3.0 quick charger. I made sure it wouldn't interfere with the bracket when I marked out its hole. I cut the hole with the jigsaw and then I fine-tuned it with a file. This type of USB charger is not meant to be used like this, but it was what I had available. So I had to modify it a little bit by soldering on some wires, and then I covered up the connections with some heat shrink tube. This whole shelf will be held up by a very simple bracket that gets screwed into the wall. I evenly space out the bracket arms so they will not interfere with any electronics. I fastened them to the long part with some glue and clamps. To further strengthen the bracket, I'm going to use screws like this. They are the longest I had, and the longer they are, the stronger the joint will be. I pre-drilled holes, countersink, and then screwed in all the screws. We are roughly halfway through the video and you seem to like it, so be kind and tap that like button for me. And if you really like my video, then you should consider subscribing to my channel, where I do stuff like this all the time. The bracket should fit into the shell, but you never know with wood, so I tested to be sure. I also checked so no electronic parts will be in the way. MDF in itself are, as you know, not very beautiful. I could use a veneer to give it more of a mature, natural look, but I wanted a simple, clean white look to fit with the rest of the room, and I can only get that design with paint. But before I can apply paint, I first need to seal all the edges with some wood filler. The wood filler also helps to fill in the voids between the parts. When I sand it, I try to leave a thin layer of wood filler. After all, it's the wood filler that seals the end grain, so it does not absorb moisture from the paint and swell up. If I sand too much, well, then the wood filler won't do much sealing with it. In this project, I got to spray paint for the first time, and I got to learn a lot from that. The first thing was about the nozzle size. I initially used a way too small nozzle, and it was about 1.4 millimeters, and later on I switched to a 2.5 millimeters. The reason for this switch is the viscosity of the paint. It was simply too thick to use, even when I thinned it out with 10% water. If I had thinned it out even further, it would have become like a mist and landed everywhere except where I wanted. And yes, I tried that. I used these really nice 3D printed cones to keep the shelves up from the paper. After the first coat of primer, I gently sanded to remove any fibers that had stood up from the moisture in the paint. 1 to 2 passes with a 240 grit sandpaper are enough. For all the sharp edges, I used abrasive pads. They're really gentle and do not remove the primer. I highly recommend using them for complex shapes. Finally, I applied 2 layers of paint. So now, when the outer parts are done, it's time to work on the inner parts. I mark out where the bracket arms are going to be so I know where to add all the electronics. There will only be one single 240-watt cable to this shelf, so I made a small entry point for it in the shell. There were not enough room for a 5-volt power adapter inside the shell, so I had to cut away all the unnecessary plastic and solder on 2 wires instead of the pins it had. I add heat shrink tubes and then hot glue to fix the wires to the adapter. I attach the adapter to the inside of the shell with double adhesive pads. I also attach the 5-volt Wi-Fi LED controller next to the adapter using the same type of pads. I preheated the shell of the USB charger to get a good strong bond between the hot glue and the plastic. It's an important step that should not be skipped. With some hot glue on the charger, I press it in place with a small block on the outside to prevent it from going too far. I did the same thing with this 12-volt adapter as I did with the 5-volt adapter. This is a Wi-Fi controlled mini smart switch that enables me to manually control and set things on a timer with my phone. The LED spotlight snaps in place with some springs holding it firmly to the shell. On the other side of the shell, I insert the touch switch that controls the 12-volt LED spotlights. I need to cut away some of the bracket to make room for the power cord, and that was very easy to fix with the palm router. The most difficult shelf to make is now ready to be mounted on the wall. First I screw the bracket to the wall. I use extra long screws where the studs are to get extra support. After that, I only had to press the shell over the bracket and secure it with a screw from above. The bookrests are pressed into the slots. Then I hook the shelf up to some power to see that everything works as it should. The power cord is hidden in a cable channel that I camouflage by having it close to the window. This is how the other shelves looks inside. It's a lot less electronics, but it still has a lot of wires to keep track of. These shelves are going up the same way the first shelf went up. The unique thing about these shelves is that the LED strips are linked to each other as well as the LED strip under the desk. This way, they can create some really nice light patterns. It's a lot of wires to keep track of, so I carefully had to mark each and every one of them. All the power adapters and the LED control unit is outside the shelves, hidden away under the desk on the cable management rack. These can be swapped out at any time, so if I want to, I can just order a new laser cut design and swap them out in a matter of seconds. There are so many pre-made designs out there to choose from. Here you can see just a few of them from a simple search. Alright, that's all.